el señor Mark McSpadden, quien está a cargo de la dirección de Sabre Labs, como responsable del grupo de investigación e incubadora, donde se analizan las tendencias en tecnologías emergentes para Sabre, llevándose a cabo todas las investigaciones y experimentos para visualizar los viajes del futuro. Además de su amplia experiencia en la industria de viajes, Mark cuenta con una gran trayectoria en tecnología aplicada en los startups. Es un líder reconocido en el mundo de la programación y concursos de códigos. Descubramos entonces las últimas tendencias y sus casos de uso en la industria de viajes en esta sesión ofrecida por Sabre Labs. Bienvenido, señor McSpadden.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for your patience through translation. As you can tell from the slide, that's not Mexico City, that's my home in Dallas, Texas. And so being from Dallas, my Spanish is just enough to be embarrassing. So I appreciate your patience as we walk through and talk about the future of travel and technology. We've already been told that it's already here. So I will be educating you on some of the things we're looking at today that translate into the future. For those university students that are here, you may not know who Sabre is, even to begin with, for our partner, long relationship with us, but we sit at the intersection of technology and travel. We provide technology to airlines and hotels, help them run their businesses, and we connect those airlines and hotels to over 400,000 travel agents across the world. Provide technology for them in that marketplace. So if you've been on a trip, you have probably used Sabre technology. You just didn't even know it was happening through one of our great partners and customers. And my job within that organization is to run a group called Sabre Labs. In Sabre Labs, we're exploring the future of technology, capabilities that we think impact travel over the next decade. So we get to play with all of the cool toys, we have been told, but we think it's very serious work because for our customers, for these airlines and hotels and travel agencies, is that we're long partners that go way into the past and hopefully go way into the future. So it's our responsibility to start understanding what that future looks like. That's one of the primary reasons our group exists and has existed for the last 20 years within Sabre, that we've had a labs function that explores this future. So some of the products that our customers may use today have come out of that. The most recent one is our trip case product, was a product of our labs exploration. But it's more than just buying fun toys and virtual reality and trying them out and hypothesizing, guessing what the future might be like for them in travel. Is that we have a real discipline to how we go about doing this. The first is that we research. We have someone on staff whose job is to read everything. Sounds like a very hard job, and it is a very hard job because we will send, his name is Philip. Philip gets everything that we think is interesting in the world. We send him links to technology journals, to academic papers, to research, to everything that's going on in the world, and he helps to distill that down and help map that to travel. We also use that internally to help our next facet, which is to explore. So each quarter, our group sits down with Philip, and we pick 3 different technologies that we're going to focus on for that quarter. So in the beginning of 2016, that list looked something like digital personal assistants, so things like Siri and Google Now. The second one on that list was biometric security. So facial recognition, retina scanning, thumbprints. The third on that list was blockchain. Blockchain, for those of you who don't know, is the algorithm behind Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency. And so our job during that 3 months, that quarter, is to dig deep into those technologies. Not only read more and understand more, but I have a team that I can hand anything from a smartwatch to a Roomba to, and I can say, build something that shows what this technology does in travel. And we do. We build working prototypes around these technologies, and I'll show you some of those today. And through that research and through that experimentation and exploration, what we're able to do is then share this content with the world. So that goes all the way out to big industry conferences, events like this across the world. I'm so excited to be here in Mexico City. I've been in Asia several times this year, and this is my first trip south of my home in Texas, and I'm really excited to be in this culture, this climate too. Great weather compared to Dallas especially. We also share this internally with our teams. Part of what we do within Sabre is we have to set up our product teams to be ready to take advantage of these technologies. And so we host events internally within Sabre to talk to our product teams about different technologies and how we think they'll impact their roadmap, the products that they'll be building later this year and into next year and the next several years. Now, I've talked a lot about a team, and so you might think it sounds like we're making a lot of investment within Sabre to do this, and you're correct. And so why do we make that investment? So I talked earlier about being a partner out into the next decade. Another reason, I come back to a couple of charts. This chart, has anybody seen this chart? This is a technology adoption curve. So this talks about how people adopt technology kind of in groups. And so you have innovators here. These are people that, buy things that you didn't even know existed. So if you have a friend that has a gadget that you didn't even know that was a thing, they're an innovator down here. Early adopters buy version 1. They stand in line to buy version 1 often. Early majority will order it online, version 1.5, version 2. Late majority waits till version 3 or 4. And the laggards are still carrying around flip phones. So these are how we think of how people adopt technology. It's interesting, we talked about the future being here. One of my favorite quotes is by an author named William Gibson. And he said, "The future is here, it's just not evenly distributed." And so this is that distribution, that uneven distribution. But one of the things we found with this chart is that it's a little deceiving, in that we have a tendency to view time from left to right, and this chart makes it seem like these progressions happen uniformly, one after the other in a kind of cadence. And what we find is that this actually happens much more like an S-curve, is that technologies can spend a lot of time and have no adoption. Voice technology that we'll talk about in just a few minutes, the first computer that could recognize voice was built in 1952. So you could speak single digits to a computer and it could recognize you in 1952. And so we're 60-something years later before we feel comfortable talking to our phones. And even then, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But you get to an inflection point, we find around 15% adoption for any population. So that once a technology hits 15% adoption, it moves really quickly up through most of those adoption stages. And what we're finding is that time is compressing. Is that if you look at major technologies, I have statistics for the US that the landline telephone took 46 years to make this jump from about 15 to 75%. The radio took 12 years. The smartphone took 6 years. The tablet took 4 years. So we're seeing the time it takes to make this curve get smaller and smaller. And so what we've found as a company is that we need to be experimenting with technologies down here that haven't reached these adoption points, because if you wait, technology moves so fast that once you've developed a strategy around it and you can get it on your roadmap and get it to market, you've missed a chance to be innovative and you're rolling out something that's already expected. So these are some of the reasons why we continue to invest in this space as Sabre and continue to give me a really cool job. And that really cool job lets me play with 4 technologies right now that I'm going to talk to you about that I think impact travel over the next decade. The first of these is voice. How many in the room use some kind of voice assistant on a daily basis? Oh, that's great. That's about a quarter to a third of the room. It shows how quickly that technology goes. If I would have said that 18 months ago, I would have gotten maybe 10% or less of the room. So voice technologies we find very interesting in how they impact travel. I said that we experiment, and sometimes those experiments are very well thought out along a technology, and sometimes they're not. So our first voice project in the lab was actually a mistake. We didn't know we were going to do a voice project, but we had this really cool thing called a Google Glass. Anybody have one of those or saw those around? Oh, they were really goofy. They made me wear one for a month, and I got lots of looks. But we wanted to do flight shopping via this device, and the main interface was to talk to it. So after we said, oh, we've got a Google Glass, let's do flight shopping on it, we said, well, how are we going to do that? Well, you have to say, okay, Glass, find a flight from DFW to SFO in June. And so we started playing with different versions of this interface to really press the boundaries of what this technology can do. And we learn a lot in that process. We learn that if you say something like, okay, Glass, find a flight from DFW to SFO, departing on, and if you pause, then the computer thinks you're done. So we found that voice is really good for really short things. You can provide 2, maybe 3 pieces of information in a voice interface. And if you need more than that, you have to make it talk back to you. You have to say, okay, Glass, find a flight. And Glass could say something like, where are you going? I could say San Francisco. Say, well, when are you departing? And I could give it some dates. Maybe it could say, what's your departure and return date? So it makes you change the way you think about the technology once you've held it in your hands and played with it a little bit. The next one that we've been talking about lately is Amazon Echo. Has anyone seen this device? Probably not marketed very much here because sadly this device is only available in English. Now, I also use this to talk about how far the technology has come, because if Amazon Echo would have been built and delivered 3 or 4 years ago, English only, everyone in the world would have said, yay, this is amazing. How amazing is this technology? Just a few years later, English only, it's kind of like, are you even trying in this space? When Siri can support 15 languages and Google can support over 20. Like, the fact that there is an English-only device on the market seems silly. I will caveat this. The thing they did here is they made this device so that you could build things on top of it, so that you could build applications that run on top of it. And by limiting the scope of the language at the beginning, you're able to try some things. We've built some things we call auditory dashboards. So things that could help you as a travel manager or an agent to ask the device, how many travelers do I have traveling today? And then get an answer back. How many of those are VIPs? You have 12 VIPs in these countries. You could say, if an event happens across the world, you could ask it. You could say, do I have anybody in Turkey right now? And it respond back to you that says yes. This auditory dashboard, not to replace everything that we do on a screen, but as a jumping off point before that. Because if you were to do that today, right now, you'd pull out your phone and open an app, and 30 seconds to a minute later, you'd be ready to type in your question basically to your device. This provides a really low friction way to start interacting on travel. And we're seeing it on service and support. We're seeing it on shopping as people want to do shopping this way, especially inspirational shopping. I want to go to the beach. I want to go on a vacation. Some really interesting applications there. And the same thing that we're doing as we're talking to these machines, I say talking to these machines. I got a video from one of my teammates 2 days ago, and we have these Amazon Echoes in our houses, lots of us, and his 4-year-old son had gone up to not the Echo, but the radio in the room, and the radio was playing, and he has a video of his son going up to it and saying, "Stop." And not doing anything back. Is stop. Like, Dad, it doesn't understand. What's the matter with this? The same way that if you saw kids that when they first got touchscreens, they thought everything was a touchscreen. I think my kids think that they can talk to any device, anything in the world. But it's more than just talking. We're also texting. We're spending a ton of time on these messaging platforms. So messaging platforms, number one, your messaging app on your phone is your most used app, is what studies will show us, that you spend over 50% of your time on your mobile device in something like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger if you're in this part of the world. WhatsApp, over 1 billion monthly active users. Facebook Messenger's now over 1 billion monthly active users. What we look across the world, we see QQ Mobile and WeChat over in Asia. Huge numbers of people using messaging platforms daily. And the idea is to go meet travelers where they are. Travelers are using these messaging apps to talk to their friends. They're becoming more comfortable using them to correspond with businesses, and this is a place where we can reach out to them. WeChat, I mentioned, especially in China, has been doing this for quite a while. They have official accounts that you can message back and forth with, but they also have a whole concept of storing your credit card on file and then using the messaging application as basically a new home screen, a way to launch out and do things like order a taxi or buy air and train tickets. This takes you into kind of a mobile web interface, much like they would get on your regular mobile website. And while that's interesting, Facebook's decided to go a different way with this. So Facebook, when they announced their platform on top of their messaging service, focused a lot more on the conversational component, making it more textual with graphical elements where appropriate. And so we've been experimenting with this quite a bit in travel. One of the things my team has been working on is a project we call Logan. Most of our projects get pretty logos because they're more fun that way. And Logan is a service and support and itinerary management that happens all via Facebook Messenger. So the first thing I do is I link to an account. This is really ugly, but it'll get better. Where I need to tell Facebook Messenger, this is the account that I'm associated with, in this case, we're using Tripcase. Then I can use natural language to ask things about my trip. Now, Logan is just another person in my Facebook Messenger, just like my wife is, just like my friends are. And so when it's time to travel, instead of opening a different app that I'm using, I open up Facebook Messenger and I say, does my hotel have a gym? Does it have a pool? On day of travel, I say, what's my flight status? And when I land, it's really interesting because the same device, the same app that I'm using to tell everybody that I landed, I just switch over and I say, where's my hotel? And I get an address. And within Facebook Messenger, this also brings up an option to just one touch and get an Uber to that destination. We can also do some more fun things because messaging apps are fun too, is that use emojis as inputs so that if I just send Facebook Messenger and Logan a plane emoji, it knows that I'm asking about my flight status. And you may not know that there's actually a hotel emoji built in to the standard, and that'll give my hotel. These seem a little silly at first, but for someone who travels as much as I do, I can now, in like 2 taps, get my hotel location because these icons, these emojis, become my most frequently used ones. And so I can open up my keyboard, hit 2 buttons, and now I know where my hotel is. Once you've done the hard work to get it on one messaging platform, it kind of doesn't matter which one you go to next. This is Logan running on SMS. And so the idea is once you've done this natural language, you can easily port it to other platforms. And so we look at both voice and messaging, and because we're at this place where we get some space to think about these things, we could start calling both of these conversational systems. And in travel specifically, we're seeing a lot of movement in conversational systems in 3 kind of ways. The first is shopping. So a lot of message-based startups, a lot of OTAs are doing this kind of input. I want to go from this place to this place on this date, and then it tries to provide some options here. We're seeing a lot of movement in this space. What I'll say is that these interfaces are okay right now. They're not great. But what they do is we're finding people are providing a ton of context. In their initial request, instead of just filling out a web page, they're saying, I'm going to a conference in a city, and I'm looking for a flight that gets me there early. Or I'm planning a bachelor weekend, and I really want somewhere with good fishing. So this is context that they're loading into the shopping experience that we've kind of missed thus far in using technology to do shopping. The second place we're seeing it in service and support, we're already seeing KLM, Hyatt using the Messenger platform to let people converse with them. Now, right now, they're conversing mostly with humans, but we're seeing a trend that to see how many of these conversations can first maybe be handled by automation, by AI, to answer it automatically, and then make sure that when they do go to humans in a call center, that they're more high-value conversations that are being had. And merchandising is a big question mark here. Everyone in the industry is talking about it. Nobody's doing it. And we have a hypothesis is that you have to do one of these before you can do that third one. And so it'll be interesting to see how people start to leverage these to make merchandising happen via these messaging platforms. We have lots of complicated slides we end up making about how all these systems fit together. What I want you to know is that as people go throughout this process of using one of these conversational systems, is that we think at any point it's important they be able to talk to a person, a real person. And so we think that the real interesting work is going to be how do you hand off to this person? How does a conversation go from a bot to a person, and then maybe even back out to a bot for something like payment if needed? So these are things that we're spending a lot of time in the lab exploring right now. And so I've talked to you about voice-based interfaces, message-based interfaces. We're going to make a shift now and talk about a group of technologies we like to call digital realities. So who has tried on virtual reality? Virtual reality headset? Only a couple of hands? All right. Samsung is advertising these all over the city right now, just so you know. Virtual reality is a full immersion. You put this headset on, you can't see anything around you except what's on the screen here. So what this looks like is that a lot of these devices, I'll show you here, right now are powered by a cell phone. So you take a cell phone, this is your computer and screen, you put it in this headset ever so gently, you lock it in, you put this headset on, and now you have options of lots of different content to see on this device. Really interesting application of the technology, and like I said, Samsung is pushing this very hard. We also have some systems we call tethered systems over here. The quality of these systems is significantly better, but you need some kind of gaming PC to use them. This fall, Sony PlayStation will release a version, a VR version, and everybody in the industry is really looking at this launch to see if there can be adoption of virtual reality in the home. It's even drawn the attention of Google, who would like to do with virtual reality what they did with mobile phones. So they built the Android operating system. Google said, we don't want to make the hardware. You write the hardware, we'll do the operating system to make sure that you make VR Android content once and it runs everywhere. They're doing the same on VR. They call this Daydream, where you create VR content once and it could play on a multitude of different VR devices. We've seen travel actually be very fast to adopt this, especially recently because in the old days of virtual reality, 5 years ago, most of the content was created digitally. It was all computer-generated content. The change has been is now we can take video cameras out into the world and capture the real world and display that in virtual reality. And it makes a significant difference in what these are being used for. So Marriott uses these in a couple of inspirational places where you can put on a headset and be shown a beach, or in some of their hotels you can check out this headset from the front desk and be shown different places to travel or digital postcard of the location that you're in. But really interesting is that in the last probably 4 months is we've seen a large rise in what I would call product level virtual reality. So not let me show you a beach, let me show you a mountain. It's let me show you first business class. This is United's new business class called Polaris, and they have a virtual reality setup that they have with it so that you can view it through one of the devices that we have, and it is a full, like you can look all the way around, you get a sense for what that experience is like. And we're seeing several airlines, several hoteliers look to virtual reality as a way to differentiate their products. What I think is a real opportunity for our agencies is to be a distribution partner for this content, especially if you have people that come into your agency. Imagine handing them a headset and not just even past the point of inspiration, being able to show them the difference between a long haul on United versus Cathay or something like that would be a really interesting use of this technology. And the nice thing about using it in agencies is we don't have to wait for the general public to adopt the headset technology, is that we can put several VR headsets in your agency, and that's all the adoption you need, because anyone that walks in your door now has a VR headset to use. Really interesting times here. And honestly, some things that we didn't expect to see. We didn't expect to see product-level virtual reality happen so quickly. We also see a pure entertainment use of this. Qantas has actually handed these out on some first-class flights. Just like you hand out headphones, they hand out the whole device, and you can watch a movie or do different experiences through that device. And so virtual reality, we think, is a really interesting dovetail with travel. The next one I'm going to talk about, next digital reality, is called augmented reality. I expect even less of you to experience augmented reality until I show you this picture. Anyone play some Pokemon Go? Ah, yes. I see some eye rolls, too. So Pokemon Go is a very, very crude, rudimentary augmented reality, is that when you hold your phone up, you get the camera view of what's going on in the world, and you get an extra digital layer on top of it. So that's what augmented reality is, putting a digital layer on top of the physical world. And so we've seen this before in travel use cases. This is the Google Translate app. It uses your camera. You can point it at any sign, and you don't even, most of the time it has good language detection. You don't even have to tell it what language you're going from and to. It knows what language it's seeing and can tell you that you usually like to see things in English. And you've seen examples like this from Foursquare and other providers where you hold your phone up down the street and it shows you different places you might could eat. Beyond visual augmented reality, though, there's also auditory. So the translation you're listening to right now is a type of augmented reality. Is that what's going on in the world is being augmented by something that you're experiencing that I'm not experiencing with you. We've also seen, I saw a headset, different speakers. We have some earbuds in the lab where you can turn up and down different frequencies from the outside world. So you can actually go to the park and turn down the crickets if they're too loud, which is kind of a crazy idea. We've also seen an attempt at real-time translation through these devices. But what everyone wants to see is these kind of headset-based devices. Like, how do I do something like this? So this is the Microsoft HoloLens. It is a really heavy device, but it's their first development version of it. And it's a wearable version of augmented reality. So instead of holding your phone up, you put this headset on, and you get to see things that nobody else in the room can see. You haven't seen it yet, only a few people have, but somehow they've managed to raise $1.5 billion in funding to do what they're doing in augmented reality. So it is either the greatest augmented reality I've ever seen or the biggest scam in the history of raising money. We'll see which one it is. So that's a quick look at Sabre Labs, why we do what we do, some of the technologies that we're really interested in, especially in how they impact the travel landscape. We also have 2 virtual reality headsets. Well, I have one of them right now. And 2 of the HoloLens outside during the break that you can try. I see us using agencies for. The same that you've seen on the corporate side, the corporate booking engine ends up being a really good tool for your agency, for your company, for going point A to point B, really easy trips. Once you start getting into more complex trips, that's where that model falls apart right now. And I think you'll see the same things with these tools, that the agency is still the area of expertise. And in fact, if I went back to my conversational model, let's see if I can do this. the reason I love this technology in travel more than any other industry, like any industry, is the fact that we have this great knowledge base here. If I wanted to do conversational systems in consumer electronics, and my bot can't answer the question, I kind of don't have any other options. I'd have to curate a new group of people that could answer these questions. Travel, we have this, and so we've seen people that start with all the conversations are between humans and people. And then we figure out which ones of those are actually valuable for everybody involved. And so I think that's what we'll start seeing is that, that refinement of which ones are best self-service or automated assisted, and which ones are really high value for the agent. Because I still think there are. The amount of travel that I've done this year, there are times I need to talk to an agent. There are times when I just need to know something about my location.
¿Alguna otra pregunta que alguien desee formular? Pues no, al parecer todo ya quedó clarísimo. Bueno, sí, por favor. Sí.
I would say right now, some of the things, if you can do it easily on a website, then conversational is just another tool for that. If you have a lot of people calling in for specific things, then I think that's where I would draw the line. Also, the more we're building these conversational systems, if you have to go back and forth with the system more than about 5 times, is a number that we're finding as we're experimenting, then maybe it's not something that I want to do automated assist. Maybe it's something that I do want you to talk to a human through. Because that back and forth wears on the relationship, it wears on that interaction. And again, I'll say the transition point is going to be very important. So once you've gone back and forth 5 times, or whatever we know that number is that transitioning you to a person and how that happens, and what that person knows about your conversation when you get it is going to be such important part of whether that's a seamless transition or a not so good transition.
Bien. Solicito la presencia del licenciado Edgar Solís, presidente de la Asociación Metropolitana de Agencias de Viajes, para entregar un reconocimiento al señor McSpadden. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mark, in the name of our association, Sabre, and even the university, I'd like to thank you a lot. I think this information is very valuable for us. Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thanks.
And this is a special book of the 50 years anniversary of the university. Thank you, Paco, Doctor.
Oh, thank you so much. We talked a lot about some of the technologies. Some more general things I would say, though, are we look at a lot of different technologies, and we actually see different regions adopting them differently. Asia has been really fast to adopt the messaging technology, pretty far out in front of anything that's happening. In the US, some of that's because the applications they were using were more open to build on top of, so there's nothing you can do about that. Some of it's just because of the nature of some of it's cultural of public transportation. So if you're riding on a rail or riding a subway for 30 minutes a day, you try to figure out things differently than if you're riding in a car. for someone like me in the United States. So there's a lot of pieces that come into play of different regions adopting different technologies. What I would say to you is to understand your region really well. Like, what are the advantages you have here that the rest of the world can't duplicate? That's where I think you start becoming a hub for this technology and for this travel. Is what is that? I don't know what it is for you here in Mexico City or in the surrounding area. It maybe is a gateway to Latin America and South America. I think that you've seen Hong Kong be that for Asia, and be able to build their whole tourism and technology around, hey, we are, some people would call it Asia Light. It's a good way to get your foot in the door. So I think those, from a technology perspective, those are the interesting things. Some of the more traditional travel questions are going to be around some of the things that were mentioned earlier about Airbnb and Uber. I mentioned on the radio this morning, I think that traditionally direct channels run out. Is that Airbnb.com is the same as Hilton.com. Okay, they have a lot of rooms, they have some really unique and very special content. But at the end of the day, it's a .com site, it's a hotel.com site. And at some point, I think they're going to need broader distribution. The same with Uber is that Uber is just avis.com or Enterprise or Hertz, whatever ground transportation you have. It's a direct channel, and I still think the distribution model is really strong. Now, sometimes that takes a little bit of time. Sometimes that takes a lot of time. If I look at Ryanair in Europe, Ryanair is a low-cost carrier, and for the longest time thought the marketplace, the GDS, was a total waste of time, was the worst thing in travel, and their president and CEO would tell anyone who would listen to that. And now their content is on every GDS because they found out that the direct channel can only do so much. We're seeing the same in airline ancillaries. So paying for seats, paying for bags, is that airlines have enjoyed a good 2-year run of being able to sell that directly to travelers. And now they're seeing that flatten off a little bit. And they're starting to say, okay, how can I distribute this content? How can I use this great network of agencies to sell seats and bags and other things? They come from all kinds of backgrounds. I was telling someone last night, my team in the lab is, we have a mathematician, we have a former newspaper writer, we have someone with a psychology degree, we have an MBA, we have a wide gamut of people, and that's just in my team. If you looked across Sabre, you would find a large intersection of different backgrounds, and so it's a great place to work in that regard.
So towards that, Sabre is a huge company with many areas, but in your special area, how do you handle the way the youth wants to work now? Because we're used to working 8 hours a day, 6 times a week or 5 times a week. But it seems like youth is not looking for that, right? They're looking for a bit more personalized rules of job. And in your area, basically, do you find that when you hire people, and is people willing to work in a different basis than we used to do?
Great question. A few things that I've learned with my team is that I have the youngest person we just hired out of Dartmouth, so she's 23. The oldest on my team is 42. So we have a couple of different paradigms of what expectations are of work, several different family situations, lots of different things. And what I've found is that it's not that the youth wants to work less, they want to work more personalized. I kind of want to set my own hours. I want to work at home some, I want to work from the coffee shop some. And so what we've done within our team is we've set core hours. So we have some in-office core hours, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 to 3. is our in-office core hours. So you're expected to be there. It's a great time for us to share what we're working on. It's a great time for what we call a serendipitous moments, for accidental discovery of what's going on. And then those times in between, we're very connected. We use Slack as a communication tool, as a chat room. And every day, regardless of whether we're in or not, we check in. And you say what you're going to work on for the day. And that gives the team an idea. It's not an oversight thing. It's not to watch over what everyone is doing. Is that we've got a really smart team. And that if Mark says, oh, I'm going to Mexico City, someone might say, hey, I saw that Aero Mexico has announced that they're going to try out chatbots. And I may have come across that in my research, but to have someone be proactive about that is really interesting. So a lot of that's in some of the framing too, is that a lot of the tools and techniques that we implement are not to watch over and make sure that you're checking a box for your 40 hours a week. Because at the end of the day, I tell my team that I pay you for an amount of work. That's what I want, that's what I need, is that we agree on an amount of work to get done in a week or 2 weeks, and then that's done. And we just need to be able to go about that as a team. And so that team piece is where we frame a lot of our processes as opposed to the management piece of it.
I have a question. Sometimes I feel very old looking at this technology. This technology, who's going to use it? My kids for a normal basis, this is my glasses and my whatever.
It's so unpredictable. What's funny is that I was just talking to somebody, we're talking about the voice technology, and that we actually saw a section of the older population adopt it first because they had trouble with the keyboards, their fingers, the dexterity was bad, and so they started using voice on their phones way before anyone thought that's what you do. It was out of necessity. So some of those things are unpredictable. Some of them are happening now, and they're happening fast. This product level virtual reality, I didn't think it was going to be here that fast. That they'd be creating content. Now, whether that content gets consumed is another piece. We often break down things in the lab, not in years and time, but into enabling technologies. So virtual reality, to do a good inspiration on virtual reality, takes great camera technology. Okay, it takes great headset technology. It takes a distribution network of that content. It takes probably some change in behavior on the consumer to actually watch this kind of content. So those are 4 things. And we watch each of those things individually. So when we write up reports, it's all about, we're looking for when bandwidth reaches this on mobile devices, because then you can stream virtual content. That's more of the lines that we're thinking, instead of, in 3 years, virtual reality will be mainstream.
And is it secure? Because all the information is everywhere.
The security and privacy is really interesting for us, because it's really important to Sabre. It's important to our customers. We can't have data breaches. We can't do those things. But at the same time, what we find, especially among younger generations, is as long as you can show a better experience, that you're willing to give up some data for it. You're willing to give up personal information if you get a better experience in return. I'm willing to give up my location on my phone if Uber knows where to come get me and I don't have to type it in. That's a big piece of information, my location at any given time, and I'm willing to give it up because it makes the experience easier. So there will be a line. I talk about biometrics in smartwatches. I think there are pieces of biometrics that could make travel way better. If my corporate travel manager knew that my flight was really stressful, based on my heart rate throughout the whole thing, and could proactively reach out to me. If my hotel knew that I didn't sleep well because they have smart fabric in the bed, or they know that I didn't come to bed at all, and they say, hey, it looks like you had a great time last night. Do you need an extra coffee this morning? I think those are all interesting applications, and they're either going to fall in this line of, I get better service for it, so I'm willing to give you that information, Or we might hit a point where we say, okay, nobody gets my heart rate. The heart rate seems fairly harmless.
Yes, it's
You had a question?
Yeah, well, speaking specifically about Mexico, what's your opinion in the technological way? Do you think we are going to like make we are going with the right way technologically terms?
Uh-huh.
Do you think we are going to take too long, or it's with transition?
This must be a very common concern. I've heard this question 3 times now since I've been here about, is Mexico ready? Can we take advantage of this technology? I think so. I think your smartphone adoption is a key to that. Smartphone adoption is very high here, and that is the catalyst for technology into the future. Like, that'll change over time, but for right now, you can do a ton from your smartphone. Android didn't exist as a thing. So I think we're still very early days on this technology revolution, and smartphone adoption is key, and you have it here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm studying hospitality management, and the question is, how can I use in the hotels area all this new technology? You know,
Yeah.
not only the apps, because
Mhm.
I know that they are using right now,
Right.
but this new technology, like the virtual reality or something like that.
Yeah, so on the management side, it's going to be really interesting. We've played around with several different things. So one, you saw Marriott where they could check out the headsets for guests. So some of it's just guest experience and entertainment is providing your glimpse into technology that everybody's kind of, there's a large portion of people that are kind of into technology now. It's kind of cool, like to say that, oh yeah, I tried on virtual reality, it's kind of cool. So I think there's an avenue there. On the operational side, I think that it's a lot, we've been talking about voice a lot, especially in things like cleaning scenarios, like to clean a room, having an auditory checklist seems really significantly better than having to go back to a mobile device, especially because you look at statistics we've seen on turnover, you probably know them better in your region, anywhere between 300 and 400% of turnover of cleaning staff in hotels, which means you're always training new people. And so to think about how to use these technologies to make that transition more seamless. I've talked to hoteliers that also think the number itself is a problem, and that's something we need to fix as well. But from a technology provider, how do you make the tools so that you could speak to it and say, hey, I just finished making the bed, what's next? The next thing that you need to do is do this. I've done that, what's next? You're all done, go to room 272. Once you go and you keep doing that. And to have that also happen where you can customize the language for it, it's really powerful. So those are a couple that we're looking at in that space. The other thing is that if you want to get real far out there, there's a couple of robotics companies. There's one called Butler that has been piloted in San Jose, where instead of having to send a person to send towels and water to your room, you put them in a robot, and the robot can call the elevator down. The robot gets on the elevator, goes to your room, and says, hey, here's your towel and stuff. So that stuff's a little further out, but you're seeing more people, more hotels be willing to experiment with it. Mm-hmm. And not only that, the technology would be a draw. There's a hotel we know in San Francisco that wanted to make 4 of their rooms that were not very desirable rooms into technology beta rooms to make them more attractive. So they're going to invite Samsung in to totally deck out the room. And so you could opt to stay in this really cool room that's actually not a great room, but because it has all this technology in it, now it's a desirable place for you to be. So I haven't heard back on how that pilot went, but it was an interesting idea. And for their clientele, they were in San Francisco. People like tech in San Francisco. It could be an art room. It could be lots of different things depending on what area your hotel's in.
How do you get along with your competitors? Do you really get along, or are you?
How do we get along with our competitors?
Who's your competitor?
Who are our competitors? Our main competitor is Amadeus. And Travelport's our other competitor I'd say mostly on the GDS side. The thing with Amadeus is they also compete with us in airline solutions, so providing reservation systems and operation support to airlines. And so we tend to run up against each other a little more frequently. In reality, there's not that many of us in the world that can do what we're doing. So it's really hard to get too contentious when it's a really small playground. Yes.
What about the humans, the people? Are you taking up so many jobs and like eliminating this kind of treatment face to face and this experience that cannot be?
So there's an extreme of that. The Hinna Hotel in Japan has 3 Android check-in agents. Like you talk to a robot instead of talking to a person. One's a like human-looking android. One's a velociraptor dinosaur. So like